E.J. Hradek, NHL Network, joins us now on the Adam Gold Show. My friend, thank you very much. People don't even know how late notice this is. You are such a gentleman. So let me get your thoughts. I sort of gave you mine when I texted you. Wasn't a banner start to free agency for Carolina. What are your overall views of what went down?
Well, I mean, you traded out basically Pesce and Skjei for Walker and Gostisbehere, right? I mean, on defense. So, I mean, I don't think you're better.
Right.
But I mean, are you marketably worse? Maybe not.
Right.
You know, I mean, all four of those players, there's pluses and minuses to their game. I mean, I would say they're probably not better. I mean, Pesce was a homegrown Carolina Hurricane player, and you hate to lose those guys because they are part of the fabric of your dressing room and of your franchise. So that's unfortunate. But I mean, it was pretty much a given that was going to take place. And the same thing with Brady Skjei. So Sean Walker was a good player in Philly. He went to Colorado as an acquisition at the trade deadline, and now he's a free agent, signs there in Carolina to kind of replace Pesce. He's a different kind of player, and Gostisbehere is the same thing. I mean, now Gostisbehere, you've had him before. He can play on the power play. He can shoot the puck. He's not a great defender, but I mean, he is kind of what he is as you try to patch it together. That's pretty much what happens when you lose players.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, and I will throw this in the playoffs. Dmitry Orlov and Jalen Chatfield was arguably Carolina's best defensive pairing in all situations. Their numbers, and they were not protected again, only playing bottom against bottom six forward lines. They were out there a ton with the Aho, Guentzel, Jarvis group, or when Svechnikov played with them. They were out there a ton with that group, and I thought they were, I mean, just the numbers suggest that they were really, really good. So Chatfield is back. Orlov's on the final year of his deal. So I think Carolina they may not be quite as good because I think Skjei was exceptional, but I don't think they're markedly worse on the blue line. The real issue is Guentzel walks away, Teravainen walks away, Nason walks away. That's three guys who played on your power play. Now, while Teravainen didn't have a great year, and I think they made the decision to allow him to walk into free agency before last season, it does seem like they wanted Guentzel back, and they could have had him, but they kind of negotiated themselves to a deadline that they didn't need to.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I mean, there was discussion that they were right there, and then they weren't. And then, in the end, it's, they had the opportunity to go to 8 years, I would imagine, because they'd had him for a little bit of time, and, they couldn't make it work, and then they kind of bailed and pulled the ripcord and made the trade, and, and Tampa swooped in, and, I would only say this. I mean, I think Jake Guentzel's a really good player. I don't think there's any question about that. He's a guy that scores goals. He's really smart. He's a great teammate. He plays hard. All that said, I mean, I think he turns 30 on, right around opening night.
Yep.
And he's not a big guy, and he plays hard, which means he goes into the hard areas, and he's already had one shoulder or a surgery. I mean, I just don't know about a long-term situation for Jake Guentzel. So it might be one of those ones that, you're sad you don't get it done, but 2 years from now, you might look back and say, well, maybe we're better off. And again, it's not a knock on Guentzel. I think he's a really good player. But, I just worry about smaller players that have miles on them that, he doesn't shy away from contact. And, that's what makes him a good player. If he starts shying away from contact to protect himself, well, that's not going to help his performance. So I think you get into a tricky situation with players like that. So for me, I think it's a lot that Tampa gave him. I think it would have been a lot that the Carolina Hurricanes would have gave him. But, the flip side of that is that the Hurricanes are close and you'd like to get over the hump. And now you're back to square one without a player that can help drive your offense.
There's a lot of square one on this program today because I'm later on I'll be talking about the U.S. men's national soccer team. Clearly back to square one there. So here, I agree with you about Guentzel. He's one of those guys who scores a lot of goals, but when you watch him on a day-to-day basis, he's it's almost like slow heat, right? It's just sort of, you realize over time, he's just a really good all-around player, and he scores a lot of goals because he's smart and obviously he has some ability. And I'm not trying to diminish it, but the way that contract was structured also by Tampa, which is almost all of it is bonus money. I think there's like $12 million that's salary. You can't buy that out either at the end of it.
That's a smart agent. I mean,
yeah.
For me, if I was in that situation, I was representing, if he was my client or any of these guys, I would suggest if you have any leverage, get as much money as you can in signing bonus because it can't be bought out. It's just really guaranteed money. So that's the way you do it. And, he had leverage and he was able to make it happen that way. So, good for him. For the Carolina Hurricanes, it's kind of back to square one. You got to figure out what's going on with Marty Necas.
Yes.
You got to figure out what's going on, I guess, with Seth Jarvis as well. Those are the important maneuvers right now to get that figured out. And the Marty Necas thing is, I don't have to tell you, Adam, you're right there. You see you hear the stories going around. I mean, if you have an unhappy player, I mean, is that a good thing? I mean, so, I'll be very curious to see how that whole thing plays out with him because I think he's got a lot of ability. I'm really a fan of Marty Necas as what he can bring to the table, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to work out there. And if it doesn't, I mean, you can't just give him away, and I don't think that's the intention of the franchise.
No.
So can you get somebody to give you something really significant in return? I'm not so sure.
All right, so there are maybe two trades that are potential out there. One of them is, I think, completely unrealistic. Even though Toronto might want to move on from Mitch Marner, I'm not sure they can. And I'm also not sure that Carolina and Toronto are ideal trade partners there. But what about Winnipeg? I know they're trying to move on from Nick Ehlers. They also have a young kid, McGroarty, who won't sign. Told them he won't sign. Is there a potential marriage between these two teams?
Well, I think that there's potential to that, but again, how does Winnipeg feel about Necas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I like him, but how do they feel about him? And how does Caroline feel about Ehlers? I think Ehlers is a good player, but he's a winger.
Yeah.
So
well, so is Marty.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just of the mind that those guys are they're almost interchangeable in some ways, but he's very talented. McGroarty is a good young player. I've got to see him play for the U.S. World Junior team, part of the gold medal team there, and he's a real good, earnest, hardworking, good family. I mean, I think he'd be a really good player. I think I see him more as a middle six type player in the NHL, but I mean, it's early in the game. But I mean, I think there's probably something there. I mean, that makes some sense. But again, really, it depends upon where the Jets see Marty Necas, and if indeed they like him, where is what can they do contractually to make that all work? So I think there's probably something there, but again, it's a back and forth between the managers.
E.J. Hradek, NHL Network, joining us. Final thing before we let you go. This is just your opinion. I've already given my opinion on it. Do you think Carolina has enough goaltending right now to be a playoff team?
Well, I mean, it's all rests with Kochetkov, really. I mean, because I don't have a lot of faith in anybody else there. I mean, it's like the old horse racing analogy. I mean, if there's a race where you've seen a horse run over and over, and then there's another horse that hasn't run, bet on the horse that hasn't run because you don't know the results. I mean, the horse that's run over and over and hasn't won, I think you know where you're going. So but they've always, looked at goaltending a little differently than a lot of teams do.
Right.
They've had success, but they just haven't had the ultimate success. In fact, they haven't gotten to the Stanley Cup Finals. So, I mean, they're still a ways off despite being a really strong team. So, if Kochetkov's going to be their guy, it's about time they just give him the job and sink or swim with him and see where it ends up. But at some point in time, I think that's the option that they have in house that makes the most sense to me. Outside of that, I don't know what they have in their system or what they might want to do on the trade market. But again, it goes to their, how they view goaltending, and it hasn't necessarily, Adam, been a priority. So it's kind of like we can get by with X, Y, and Z. And you've seen all those different goalies there, and, in the end, it hasn't worked. Now, guys that are, the Igor Shesterkins of the world and the Vasilevskis of the world are few and far between, right? So hard to find those guys. You got to draft them and develop them. Maybe Kochetkov can develop into someone that's somewhat similar to that, but at some point in time, you've got to be willing to give him the crease and let him play through whatever issues that he may have and see if he can do it.
That was my one criticism of the way they managed the goalies in the postseason, is that there was a reluctance to let Kochetkov go. I think they should have started him at least once in the Islanders series, and maybe they would have felt more comfortable using him in the Rangers, because ultimately they lost the series because they got out goaltended by a lot. It wasn't just by a little. They got out goaltended by 3 miles. Yeah.
By a lot, yeah.
Because I think they're honestly, and maybe it's me, but I actually thought Carolina, in terms of the way that game was played out, in terms of scoring chances, I thought Carolina was every bit or even better than the Rangers, but it didn't look that way because goaltending was unfortunately no good. E.J. Hradek, NHL Network, NHL analyst at EJ Hradek _. I forgot your last name. At EJ Hradek _ NHL. Sir, thank you so much.
Anytime, my friend. Take care.